New Zealand's film industry is small, which makes sense given that it's a small country and it didn't start regularly making feature films until 1977. It's not just small though, it's precarious, and in the past decade, something has helped keep it precarious. The infamous Hobbit Law. The Hobbit Law, more formally known as the Employment Relations Film Production Amendment Act 2010, stripped film workers of protections to make Warner Bros. Happy and keep the Hobbit films in New Zealand. Why was Warner Bros. Unhappy? Film production wages are significantly lower in New Zealand than in the US or UK, and to combat this, New Zealand Actors Equity, the Actors Union, held out signing on to the Hobbit.
All we are asking is for fair and equitable terms and conditions that our colleagues overseas enjoy.
Warner Bros. Responded by threatening to move the Hobbit films outside of New Zealand, and other film production workers, most notably WETA Workshops and Peter Jackson himself, held counter-rallies in fear for their jobs. The New Zealand government invited in Warner Bros. Executives and negotiated what became the Hobbit Law. Looking at the text of the Hobbit Law, or more accurately the Hobbit Amendment, which also seems to suit the Hobbit films themselves, it tacks on a pretty big except onto existing labor laws, reading that the law, quote, excludes in relation to a film production any of the following persons. A person engaged in film production work is an actor, voiceover actor, stand-in, body double, stunt performer, extra, singer, musician, dancer, or entertainer. A person engaged in film production work in any other capacity. And while they're at it, they also throw in video games because, hey, WETA Workshops was just about to be working on Shadow of Mordor too. Among the things excluded in the law are paid vacation, sick pay, public holidays, bereavement leave, superannuation, which in the States we might call social security, collective bargaining rights, quote, protections against unfair dismissal and discrimination for union activity, the minimum wage. It sure sounds like a hastily constructed document. Why would the government be willing to take such drastic measures? Film, as small as the New Zealand industry is still pretty big. Alfio Leotta, High Professor, notes that film accounts for 1.4% of the New Zealand economy, twice that of the US, and a significant portion of that comes from international productions filming inside of New Zealand. These international productions bring in international workers as well, but US and UK workers still get union protections and rates from their home countries. It's just NZ that doesn't. And as New Zealand filmmaker Rajneel Singh said, retaliation to actors' equity inside of New Zealand wasn't from thinking the demands were unreasonable, but from fear for their own jobs. Which makes me want to briefly touch on Peter Jackson's role in all of this because it's complicated. New Zealand actors were not given residuals for any of the Lord of the Rings films, but Peter Jackson ensured that they would for the Hobbit movies. At the same time, he actively rallied against the union. How much of this was selling out and how much of this was fear for the productions moving outside of New Zealand? No one can really say. So what did this 2010 Hobbit Law do for New Zealand film? Well, as an incentive to bring in international films, it seems to have worked, with The Guardian reporting that, quote, 35 productions visited New Zealand in 2011, contributing revenue of more than $563 million, up 15% year on year. You can also see WETA Workshops working on many more high-profile films, such as Thor Ragnarok, Blade Runner 2049, Ghost in the Shell, Godzilla, Edge of Tomorrow, Mad Max Fury Road, and many more. But I'm not terribly surprised though, because there have been incentives for international films throughout the last 2 decades. After The Lord of the Rings, large international films made in New Zealand got a tax break, and after the Hobbit movies, that break was made bigger, cutting a whole 20%, 1/5 off the federal income off those films. This growth also comes 1 year after the release of Avatar, famously filmed in New Zealand with production assistance by WETA, and the highest grossing movie of all time. On top of that, the work environment before the Hobbit Law was already freelance heavy, with people working production to production. Freelancing in a small industry is immensely stressful since, as Lorraine, Rowlands, and Jocelyn point out, workers are, quote, often at their most anxious and vulnerable during negotiations, and therefore more likely to accept poor pay and conditions simply to ensure work. The Hobbit strike was attempting to break from this individualistic process where the studios can bargain collectively, but the workers can't. John Callen, the actor for the dwarf Owen, recalls one of his co-stars tried to hold out for higher pay on the third Hobbit film. As one of the main cast already established in the last 2 films, who better to individually bargain for higher pay? The response?
You do realise we have digital images of your character, so we don't actually need you. If you want to push it, you can go. So everybody got the same deal. So although we weren't allowed to negotiate collectively, they were doing exactly the thing that we weren't allowed to do.
In a system where studios collectively bargain for New Zealand workers, Kiwis are given little and threaten to have what there is taken away when they ask for more. The Hobbit Law wasn't great for New Zealand film workers and continues not to be, but it's only part of a trend in giving more and more incentive to international productions over protections for domestic film workers. There are 4 more Avatar movies slated for production, once again to be filmed in New Zealand, and seeing the allowances given on other large productions, I'm left to wonder what will happen this time. Will this be another high-profile case for unions to rally around? Or will this be another time New Zealand resources are withheld as incentive for big movies? I know which one I'm hoping for. I'll see you next week.